Major methodologies for EIA, first of all checklist method, matrix method, overlay method, networks এবং তার সাথে হচ্ছে environmental impact values. তো first of all হচ্ছে যে checklist method are the standard list of the types of impacts associated with a particular type of projects. In preparing a checklist, first a list of activities is drawn up, then looks at the possible areas within the project area that will be affected by the activity. This is followed by characterizing the environmental aspect within the area that will be impacted. The principle of this method is to give a framework to EIA authorities so that they do not forget any important point. The principle of this method is to give a framework to EIA authors so that they do not forget any important point. And the checklist and method is good tool, but they cannot take into consideration all the particular cases that can be made during an EIA. However, they are generally sufficient for small scale projects, and these methods can be combined with the use of environmental guidelines widely proposed by authorities or donor agencies. Then first of all is the simple. So simple listing or factors like types of impacts, ranking of the impacts, then including the mitigation measures, and then comprise the list questions on the features, the projects, and the environmental impact. First of all, extension, disruptions, or the displacement of the soil. So is the extensive disruption or displacement of the soil. Number B is the objectable odors. Then questionnaires, three types of answer: yes, no, maybe. And descriptives addresses the actions, impact, mitigation, ranking different phases of the project, including mitigation measures. Then this is one kind of questionnaire with number and questions to be considered in scoping. And yes, no, which characteristics of the project environment could be affected and how, and is the effect likely to be significant, why. So is consider construction, operation, or decommissioning of the project involve actions which will cause the physical changes in the locality, topology, topography, land use changes in the water bodies, etc. Water bodies, etc. Permanent or the temporary, permanent or temporary changes in the land use, land cover, topography, including increases in the intensity of the land use. This is 1.2 clearance of the existing land, vegetation, and the buildings. This is all thing. Then number two is matrix. Matrix method provides a framework. Matrix method provides a framework for interaction between the project activities and their environmental impacts. Matrix method provides a framework for interaction between the project activities and their environmental impacts. A matrix of potential interactions is produced by combining two lists, placing one on the vertical axis and other on the horizontal axis, and it can evaluate the degree of impacts of project activities on the environmental resources. It can evaluate the degree of the impacts of project activities on environmental resources. Then matrix method is observed as two-dimensional checklist having axis of actions and axis of environmental components, and the interactions are the impacts. Matrix method is observed as two-dimensional checklist. Matrix method is observed as a two-dimensional checklist having axis of actions and axis of environmental components. The interactions are impacts. Then matrix, it is two-dimensional matrix cross-referencing. Then the activities linked to the project that are proposed to be to have an impact on the man and environment. Existing environmental and social conditions that could have possibly be affected by the project, and the activities linked to the project are listed on the axis: raw material production, building construction, water supply, energy supply, raw material preparation, pulp and paper mills, processing, gaseous emission, liquid effluents, cooling water, discharge, noise, solid waste, treatment and disposal, and the transportation. Then the issues arising from the development, environmental and social economic factors, again flora, fauna, water, microclimate, aesthetic appeal, noise, air quality, local residents, local business, local land donors, then traffic, waste, workforce, site vehicles, site machinery, raw materials, landscaping, temporary buildings of the cabin. So develop a scoring system, for example 0 for no impact, 1 for low impact, 2 for moderate impact, 3 for high impact. Then simple simple matrix, this is simply a list of environmental aspects listed among the vertical axis against which we determine whether an activity would have adverse effect, no effect or beneficial, no effect or beneficial or positive effect. So adverse, no, or beneficial or positive effect. A simple X or tick is given under this, and sometimes the activities are listed along the horizontal axis. Sometimes the activities are listed along the horizontal axis with the environmental aspects in vertical axis, and the same X is given to those pairs that have an interactions between themselves and appropriate column. Then environmental components and project activities. Environmental components মধ্যে যেটা সেটা হচ্ছে কি যে surface water quality, surface water hydrology, air quality, fisheries, territorial, wildlife habitat, this kind of thing here in environmental components. Then project activities, land construction, pesticide and fertilizer use, raw material and transport, water inland, solid waste, effluent discharge, emission, এমপ্লয়মেন্ট, এগুলো হচ্ছে আসলে প্রজেক্ট অ্যাক্টিভিটিস এর মধ্যে আছে। দেন হচ্ছে লিওপার্ড ম্যাট্রিক্স যেটা আছে, লিওপার্ড ম্যাট্রিক্স প্রোভাইড এ ফ্রেমওয়ার্ক, একটা ফ্রেমওয়ার্ক ক্রিয়েট করে থাকে ফর অ্যানালাইসিস এন্ড numerical weighting of the probable impacts, and it is a simple way to summarize and rank the environmental impacts and to focus on that impact, and which is considered to be greatest. And in leopard matrix, on horizontal axis, actions cause the environmental impact, and on the vertical axis, existing environmental conditions affected by the action. So Leopold matrix টা কি জিনিস? The Leopold matrix provides a framework for analysis and numerical weighting of the probable impacts, and analysis of the probable impacts, and it is a simple way to summarize and rank the environmental impact and to focus on that impact. It is a simple way to summarize and rank the environmental impacts and focus on that impact, and which is considered to be greatest. The in leopard matrix, on horizontal axis action on horizontal axis actions cause environmental impact, and on the vertical axis, existing environmental condition affected by the action. Then the cells of the matrix are divided by a diagonal line. The top division is used to describe the magnitude of the impact an activity will have on environmental aspect, and the bottom division is used to describe the significance of that impact. Both the magnitude and the significance are rated on the scale 1 to 10. Magnitude and size indicates how much the impact is present in this case, and significance indicates the theoretical importance of the impact. And each individual impact is estimated by the product of significance and magnitude, and this is subjective to the surveyors and is based on the baseline data collected. And if a cell has no division, it means that the activity has no impact on environmental aspects. Then this is proposed action resource. Then proposed action in proposed action, health, spawning of fish, then archaeological artifacts, tourism, downstream water pollution, social and economic aspects, forestry, fishery, navigation, aquatic plants, Leopold method. Then resource এর মধ্যে কি হতে পারে? ইমিগ্রেশন অফ লেবার, ড্যাম কনস্ট্রাকশন, ট্রান্সমিশন লাইন, রিজার্ভার ফিলিং, হেভি মেটাল ডিসচার্জ, গ্রোথ অফ অ্যাকোয়াটিক উইডস, দেন হচ্ছে কি রিলোকেশনস অফ দ্য ইনহ্যাবিটেন্টস, এটা এখান থেকে কাজ করে থাকে। দেন নেটওয়ার্কস এর মধ্যে যেটা আছে, নেটওয়ার্কস দিস আর cause the effect flow diagrams used to help in tracing the wave relationship between the existing relationship that exists between the different activities associated with the action and environmental system with which they interact. Developmental activity is identified, after which all the potential primary aspects are written down. From the primary impacts, secondary and the tertiary impacts are identified and connected onto the network. They are also important in identifying the direct and cumulative impacts, and they are more complex and need expertise for this effective use. Cumulative impacts এর মধ্যে কি আছে? Cumulative impacts are changes to the biophysical, social, economic and cultural environments caused by the combinations of past, present and reasonably feasible future action, and cumulative impacts can be positive or negative. Cumulative impact যেটা আছে সেটা পজিটিভ নেগেটিভ দুই রকমই এখান থেকে হতে পারে। Then rural road project, land and soil conversion of the arable land due to the road construction. Then decline of the crops production, decline in crop production, then হচ্ছে কি migration. Then rural road প্রজেক্টের মধ্যে যেটা আছে সেটা হচ্ছে ফরেস্ট, লস অফ ফরেস্ট এরিয়া অ্যান্ড স্পেসিস হ্যাবিটেট, and species habitat. Then হচ্ছে কি soil erosion and downstream sedimentation, soil erosion and downstream sedimentation, loss of endemic or protected or endangered species, loss of endemic or protected or endangered species, change in the productions of territorial, aquatic and man-made system. Then air and water, emissions of the air pollution, discharge, flooding and siltation, change in river hydrology changes. Then change in the microclimate, decline in the aquatic or territorial productivity, then change in the environmental opportunities and the quality of the life. Then it is a totally the cumulative impacts you can see. Then more, map overlay, this is just like on GIS mapping. Then map overlay, the separate mapping of the critical environmental features at the same scale as projected project site plan, wetlands, steep slopes, soils, floodplain, bedrock, outcrops, wildlife habitats, vegetative communities and the climate resources. Older technique এর মধ্যে যেটা সেটা হচ্ছে environmental features are mapped on the transparent plastic in different colors. Then new technique, geographic information system, GIS. GIS is there. Then next যেটা আছে next is next is overlay method. Overlay method, the preparation of a set of transparent maps which represent the spatial distribution of the environmental characteristics, extent of dense forest area. Overlay method involve preparations of a set of transparent map which represent a spatial distribution of the environmental characteristics, extent of the dense forest area. Then number 2 is the information on the wide range of variables will be collected for standard geographical units within the study area, which will be recorded on the series of maps, typically on or one for each variable. These maps will be overlaid to produce a composite. These maps will overlay to produce a composite. The resulting composite maps characterizes the area's physical, social, economic, ecological, land use and other relevant characteristics and relative to the locations of the proposed development. The resulting composite maps characterize the area's physical, social, economical, ecological, land use and other prevalent characteristics relevant to the locations of the proposed development. So number 5 is that to evaluate the degree of the associated impacts, many project alternatives can be located. Many projects alternative can be located on the final map, and validity on the assessment will be related. Assessment will be related to the type and number of the parameters chosen. To evaluate the degree of the associated impacts, many project alternatives can be located on the final map, and validity of the assessment will be related to the type and number of the parameters chosen. Then the environmental impact will be assessed by the environmental impact values, EIVs, and which may be defined mathematically as follows: EIV, then এখানে n, then এখানে I equal to 1, then VI and WI, where VI equal to relative change of the environmental quality, of the parameter in respect to the existing solution. Then WI is the relative weight of the parameter I. N equal to the total number of the parameters related with the project. Then impact identification control. যেটা আছে first of all যেটা আছে সেটা হচ্ছে চেকলিস্টের মধ্যে কি আছে, সিম্পল আছে, র্যাঙ্কিং এন্ড ওয়েটিং আছে। তো চেকলিস্টের অ্যাডভান্টেজ কি জিনিস? চেকলিস্টের অ্যাডভান্টেজ হচ্ছে সিম্পল টু আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ড এন্ড ইউজ and good for site selection and priority setting. But disadvantage is do not distinguish between the direct and indirect impacts, and do not link the action and impacts. The process of incorporating values can be controversial. Matrix method advantage is the link, action and impact, and good method for displaying the EIA result. Then disadvantage is difficult to distinguish between direct and indirect impacts, and significant potential for double counting of the impacts. significant potential for double counting of impacts, then networks যেটা আছে অ্যাডভান্টেজের মধ্যে link action to impact useful in simplified form for checking for second order impacts, handles direct and indirect impacts. Basically link action to impact useful in simplified form of checking for second order impacts, handles direct and indirect impacts. And what is the disadvantages? Can become very complex. This can become very complex if used beyond simplified version. Can become very complex if used beyond simplified version. Overlays advantage হচ্ছে easy to understand. Overlays advantage এর মধ্যে যেটা আছে সেটা হচ্ছে easy to understand, good display method and good setting tool. Okay, easy to understand, good display method and good setting tool. This is the overlays. And disadvantage: addresses only the direct impacts and do not address the impact duration or probability. Address only the direct impacts and do not address the impact duration or probability. Then GIS and computer expert system. GIS and computer expert system মধ্যে যেটা আছে সেটা হচ্ছে excellent for impact identification and analysis. This is excellent for impact identification and analysis. And disadvantage: what is the disadvantage of it? Heavy reliance on knowledge and data. Heavy reliance on knowledge and data. So which to choose? So each form of the impact has advantage and disadvantage, and each form provides unique information that can be very beneficial to understand component interactions as well as the activity component interactions. Some considerations for the selections of the impact assessment method are the scale of the project. Generally small scale projects go for checklist as it is comprehensive for that purpose, and medium scale projects can use either matrix or network. Medium scale projects can use either matrix or network, and depending on the potential impacts on the project activities, large scale projects are better of using matrix. Large scale projects are better of using matrix, and extent of detail required. Checklists tend to be more descriptive. Whereas networks are quite simple in appearance, and matrix have the ability to the both descriptive or simple, and depending on the type of matrix used. Depending on the matrix use, then তারপরে হচ্ছে এখানে যে time available for the project. Sometimes EIA team is hard pressed for time and cannot spend too much time figuring out all the implications of the activity, and they try to go for most significant impacts and descriptions for these impacts. Budget involved. This will again determine the amount of detail that can be generated from the baseline study, and budget has an indirect influence on the method of analysis used. Then criteria for the selections of the EIA methodology. Criteria for selection of the EIA methodology. The criteria for the selection can be broadly classified into 5 classes. One is the general simplicity. The methodology should be simple so that the available manpower with limited background knowledge can grasp and adopt it without much difficulty. Simplicity: the methodology should be simple so that the available manpower with limited background knowledge can grasp and adopt it without much difficulty. Then manpower, time, budget constraint. The methodology should be applied. Methodology should be applied by a simple group with a limited budget under time constraint. So then flexibility: the methodology should be flexible. Enough to allow for necessary modifications and changes through the courses of the study. Okay, so first of all কি আছে ক্রাইটেরিয়া, যে ব্রডলি ক্লাসিফাইড আমরা পাঁচটা ভাগে করতে পারবো. একটা হচ্ছে জেনারেল মধ্যে সিম্পলিসিটি, ম্যানপাওয়ার, টাইম and budget constraint, flexibility. So simplicity, what is simplicity? The methodology should be simple so that the available manpower with limited background knowledge can grasp and adopt it without any difficulty. Manpower, time and budget constraint. The methodology should be applied by a small group with a limited budget and under time constraint. The methodology should be applied by a small group with a limited budget and under time constraint. Flexibility: the methodology should be flexible. Enough to allow for necessary modifications and changes through the courses of the study. The methodology should be flexible enough to allow for necessary modifications and changes through the course of the study. দেন ইম্প্যাক্ট আইডেন্টিফিকেশন এর মধ্যে যেটা আছে সেটা হচ্ছে কি কম্প্রিহেন্সিভনেস। দ্য মেথোডোলজি শুড বি sufficiently comprehensive. The methodology should be sufficiently comprehensive to contain all the possible options and alternatives and should give enough information on them to facilitate over proper decision making. The methodology should be sufficiently comprehensive to contain all the possible options and alternatives and should give enough information on them to facilitate proper decision making. Isolations of the project impacts. The methodology should suggest the procedures. The methodology should suggest the procedures for identifying the project impacts as distinguished from the future environmental changes produced by other causes. The methodology should suggest the procedures for identifying project impacts as distinguished from the future environmental changes produced by other causes. Then timing and duration. So first of all, the methodology should be able to identify accurately the location and extent of the impact to a temporal scale. So what is the impact identification? First of all, the comprehensiveness. Number two is the isolation of the project impacts, then timing and duration. Then impact interpretation and the evaluation. Significance. The methodology should be able to assess the significance of the measured impacts on a local, regional and national scale. The methodology should be able to assess the significance of the measured impacts on a local, regional and national scale. Portrayal of with or without situation. The methodology should be able to aggregate the vast amounts of information and raw input data. Uncertainty of the possible impacts is very real problem in environmental impact assessment, and the methodology should be able to take these aspects into account. Uncertainty for the possible impacts is a very real problem in environmental impact assessment, and the methodology should be able to take this aspect into account. Risk. The methodology should identify the impacts that have low probability of the occurrence but a high potential for damage and losses. Risk এর মধ্যে যেটা আছে, the methodology should identify the impacts that have low probability of occurrence but a high probability for drainage and loss. Public involvement এর মধ্যে যেটা আছে সেটা হচ্ছে methodology should suggest a mechanism for public involvement in the interpretations of impacts and their significance. The methodology should suggest a mechanism for public involvement in the interpretations of impacts and significance. Then impact communications এর মধ্যে যেটা আছে সেটা হচ্ছে কি যে affected parties আছে। impact communications এর মধ্যে যেটা আছে সেটা হচ্ছে affected parties. The methodology should provide a mechanism for linking the impacts to specified affected geographical and the social groups. Then setting description, it should be provide a descriptions of the project setting to aid the users in developing an adequately comprehensive overall perspective. Then key issues, it should provide a format for highlighting the key issues and impacts identified in the analysis. Then compliance, one of the most important factors in choosing a methodology is whether it is able to comply with the terms of the reference established by the controlling agency. So impact communication এর মধ্যে affected parties, setting description, key issues and compliance, these 4 points will be covered.